Welcome to My Favorite Drum Gear. I'm Brady. Today, we're looking at a new product from folks at World Drummers. These are their smart pads, which they say can almost instantly turn your acoustic drum kit into an electric kit. Let's check them out. So we've already taken a look at a couple products from the folks at World Drummers, namely their Unlock electronic cymbals, as well as a cowbell that they had sent me a while back. Now we're looking at a product that frankly doesn't currently really exist on the market, and these are their smart drum pads. Now, they tell us that these drum pads will just sit on top of our existing acoustic drums, plug into a module, and allow us to instantly convert acoustic drums to electronic drums. We're going to talk today about some products in the past that were similar to these that were not successful. We're going to talk about how these pads from World Drummers are different. We're going to talk about who might want to own these and the different uses that they might have. I'm going to walk through my initial impressions of the pads. We'll look at the technical specifications. I'll go through a playability demo. Then we'll discuss some of the shortfalls I found. And finally, I'll give my overall thoughts. This is the part where I ask you to like and subscribe, knowing that if I get to 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to get a hold of Lemon's top-of-the-line drum kit and give that a full and thorough walkthrough to see if that's something that we might all want to own. But for now, we're talking about these smart pads from the folks at World Drummers. And I'll let you know that they did send me an entire kit's worth of pads for me to try out. I do get to keep them, but I let them know, as I'm letting you know, that my reviews are completely honest and are my own thoughts. Now, before talking about these smart pads, let's talk about some pads that have existed in the past. They're no longer on the market, that were kind of designed to do a similar or the same thing. The first product was a company called Infused, N-F-U-Z-D, that came out with their Inspire pads several years ago. Now, these pads looked a little similar to these. They would sit on top of the drums and then actually clamp down or snap down over the rim and then plug into a module and allow you to convert your acoustic kit into an electronic kit. Now, the problem with these Infused pads was more logistical than anything else. They had proprietary cables that came out of their pads and plugged only into their unit. And then their module had all sorts of hardware and software issues between not enough storage space and an interface that was incredibly detailed, but not really set up for a novice or even sometimes intermediate electronic drummer. The YouTube channel 65 Drums did a full analysis on why these drums failed. If you want to know more, check them out. Now, the next company was Aquarian, and they've had a lot of good products over the years. They did two products released at the same time. Aquarian in-heads and on-heads. Now, the in-heads were a hybrid drumming thing we're not going to get into right now, but the on-heads looked very similar to these. They sat on top of the drums. They didn't snap down. They just laid on top, and they, again, were made to quickly convert your acoustic drums to electronic. Once again, the problem with this product was more in the execution, in that they also had, I believe, proprietary cables that ran into a signal booster that actually you had to remove a tension rod to attach this onto your drums, thereby detuning the drums in the first place. And then each drum had this booster box attached to the shell that then ran into a module. So the ease of quickly converting your acoustic to electric drums in both of these cases was not actually that easy, and was kind of a hassle in the extra things you had to attach, and that you had to buy a whole bunch of other people's stuff. The Aquarian heads, on top of having the extra booster box, were also single zone heads. And if you wanted a rim sound, you had another piece of gear that you had to attach to those to run into your module. So how did these smart pads differ from those products? Well, namely in the fact that they are quite genuinely plug and play. There is a single TRS cable, a stereo 1/4-inch input that you plug into here, you set them on the drum, you plug the other end of the input into the corresponding pad on your module, and you start playing. As with anything, there's a little bit of dialing in that will probably be needed, but after that, you're good to go. So where the other products failed because they might have been needlessly complicated, this is about as easy as it gets. So the next question we're going to ask is, who are these made for? Now, it's pretty obvious that the number one market probably is folks who have enough space at home for their acoustic kit, but the acoustic kit is too loud. So you're in an apartment, you've got a family, your practice times are weird, and so you want a way to practice your full drums, but you don't just want to hear the tap tap of traditional drum mutes that get rid of all the actual sound of your drums and cymbals. So these can instantly turn your acoustic kit into an electronic kit just by setting the pad on top of the drum, plugging it in, and going. That's probably the primary market, and that makes sense. I've been thinking about these, and while I've been playing them, some of the uses that folks might not think about. Now, obviously, if you are that main market customer who's got the acoustic kit at home and needs to make them quiet, but still wants to hear what drums should sound like, you'd probably be interested in purchasing the whole kit. However, World Drummers sells individual pads in various sizes, currently 10, 12, and 14, but I'm told that they're going to be making an 8, 13, and 16-inch pad as well. Now, why might you buy individual pads? There are a ton of reasons. Thinking here of a gigging drummer who's playing, I don't know, a cover set, and in your set, you've got a bunch of tunes that your regular acoustic kit is going to handle just fine, but then, I don't know, you're throwing in We Will Rock You, In the Air Tonight, and Sexual Healing. Well, when We Will Rock You comes around, you grab your two pads, you throw one on the floor tom, and that covers your stops. You throw one on the snare drum, and that covers your claps. And now you've got boom, boom, clap, We Will Rock You. When Sexual Healing comes around, you switch your module over to an 808 sound, throw the snare drum pad on, and now you can play that song pretty well. Throw all the pads up for In the Air Tonight and do those Phil Collins toms and sound perfectly accurate. The benefit here is that these are drum mutes with triggers. If you're playing We Will Rock You and you have just regular drum triggers on and you're trying to get stomp, stomp, clap, someone in the audience, regardless of how big your venue is, someone's probably going to hear floor tom, snare instead of stomp, stomp, clap. Because these are drum mutes, they're not supplementing the sound, they're completely replacing the sound. And that opens up an entire new way to present live music using electronic drums. So that means that, again, your hybrid drummer with use of these pads and a module, even just a small TM2 with 4 inputs, can cover most of the kit. And you can now, again, not supplement your tom sounds, but replace them with steel drum, with different melodies. Your options in this way are only as wide as your imagination because, again, no one's going to hear the sound of the toms when they're muted. Some other options here are your worship drummer, who this service you might need to tame down your full acoustic kit, but you don't want to have to haul your electronic kit, or maybe the church doesn't have an electronic kit. You can throw these up and let the sound engineer manage everything. I'm thinking of more traditional church services. Maybe the Christmas church service has a full orchestra or a small orchestra. You now need some timpani or some sleigh bells or a wind chime or something like that. As a pit musician, if you're doing a play and are playing mostly acoustic drums, but then have that one song where instead of a hi-hat, it's a sleigh bell through the entire song, but you still need to be playing a kit, you can just throw one of these pads up and you don't have to worry about getting an SPD-SX or hooking up a single pad somewhere and having to move it. These don't take up any room when they're not plugged in. And beside that, they don't need a dedicated stand. They don't even need to actually sit on a drum. You could have 4 of these pads set up on a coffee table, and now you have 4 timpani, as long as they're plugged into a module that's making timpani sounds. And that opens it up to an additional audience of folks who might be DJs, or if your keyboard player or your singer is just going to play a floor tom on one song, this makes it a whole lot easier to not have to haul the whole floor tom. A small snare stand, or this could even sit at the end of the keyboard, or a music stand that's folded down and you can get by on one song. And so again, the applications of these pads are pretty impressive when you really think about it. On top of that, if you're into home recording, home music production, and would just rather play out a beat than click every note in, a couple of these pads gives you a bass drum, snare drum, hi-hat, and you can record those lines and then reprogram them all to toms and cymbals and do that. You're playing in real time with human feel, but it can be done on the floor, on a desk, on a coffee table, on a snare stand. You don't actually need the full kit. So while I imagine that the core audience will be folks who are trying to make their acoustic kit silent for their neighbors and their family, I think there are a lot of other options here, especially for live and recording music, that make these pads desirable, as long as they work well. So now that we understand that these aren't just mutes, but are an incredibly durable seeming and portable way to bring your electronic drums or to supplement your existing setup, let's actually take a look at these things. What do they feel like? What do they look like? And then we'll get into playing them a little bit. So these guys show up in small individual boxes. As far as the drums themselves go, this is a snare drum and 3 toms, pretty small and compact. Walking through, this is your 10-inch tom, your 12-inch tom, your 14-inch floor tom, and your 14-inch snare drum. Now, these are all 2-zone pads, so you have a rim sound and you have a head sound. But talking about feel, the underside here is like a neoprene, feels like a mouse pad, like the underside of a mouse pad. Probably, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch thick or so. It gives just enough padding to absorb a little bit of hit, help mute the drums, and then also just a little bit of protection if you're sliding one on and off. Keeps from marring up maybe a rim, and then also keeps them from sliding around too much if you've got them set on a table. The rims themselves feel like the rubber from an electronic cymbal. They've got a little bit of give. They do not have any play in the rubber. You know, you get to the ends of some of those electronic cymbals and you can tell where the rubber isn't actually attached to the pad. These are wrapped pretty tightly. And then the drum pad themselves, these feel like a practice pad. And that's exactly where they are. The rubber on a practice pad maybe feels a little bit thinner, a little bit harder on my Vic Firth practice pad anyway, but you can tell the sound is pretty similar, not much louder at all. So these have a nice weight to them. They feel pretty sturdy. And then as we look, we've got plastic running all the way around here that I think makes up the body. And then you just have your one single 1/4-inch stereo input here. The writing says digital pad and then says do not use non-dedicated connectors. I don't know exactly what that means. And then you just have W Drummers logo on everything. And so that's the pad. They're all identical, you know, as far as construction, just in different sizes. Now, World Drummers did ship me an entire kit, meaning that I've got a bass drum as well. So how is that handled? It's with this right here, plastic bass drum pad. It's got enough space for a double pedal. It's got some retractable threaded spurs. Again, a single 1/4-inch input. And then they also send you this bent beater. And the way that this all goes together is to take your bass drum pedal and insert this from the bottom up. Now, I will say that this feels just a tiny bit oversized for every bass drum pedal that I tried it in. Tama Speed Cobra, Mapex Falcon, a DW 7000, and a cheap PDP or something like that. It fits in the hole, but it's a tight fit. And so we're going to really push it in and it'll attach. And then this guy fits right on our rim mount and tighten it down. We'll tighten the screw here. and we're ready to go. This feels, again, kind of mouse pad-ish as far as the this orange or red pad right here. But then when you push on it, the whole thing does sink a little bit into this plastic housing. The bass drum feels fine as far as playing it. If you've ever played with a bent beater like this, you'll know that there's a difference in feel as far as how the weight shifts. The beater's not coming up over, which kind of shifts the balance and helps you throw the beater forward. This is a pull down. It's a little bit of a different feel. But we'll talk a little bit toward the end of the video about some of the limitations with this bass drum and some of my thoughts on it. So again, the pads for a 5-piece kit are all right here. This can fit in a backpack. This can fit maybe at the end of a trap case. It could fit in a cymbal bag, certainly. This is a pretty small setup to take care of converting your acoustic drums to electronic drums non-permanently and temporarily. Looking now at the technical specifications, you'll see that I have a top diameter measure that accounts for the rim, as well as a bottom diameter measure that actually is the part that sits on your drum head. You'll notice there's nothing too crazy here. The heights are all the same and the sizes are proportional to the size of the drum. You'll see that the snare actually weighs a little bit more, and we'll find out why soon. And also you'll have to move your bass drum back about 4 inches to account for the size of the pedal. Guys, this really is as easy as you think it is. You plug it in, you plug it in, you put it on the drum. No hassle, super easy. So when it comes to dialing these pads in, I started with the bass drum pad, and the KT10 seemed to be the closest to what it was actually wanting to be. Again, this is using a TD17 module. No big issues. The volume got where I needed it to be when I needed it to be there. With the snare drum, I've got that dialed in as a PDX12, and I really had to whack on the drum to get it to register the full 127 volume, so I went ahead and upped the sensitivity just by 3, and I found that when I did that, I was getting exactly what I wanted as far as responsiveness. And so you see here, no big problems. My rim shots are coming through at full volume, which is where I want them, and having no problems whatsoever. All responsiveness is right where I want it, just by changing the sensitivity a little bit. Moving on to the first tom, it's a 10-inch tom, but I've got it registered as a PDX8, and you can see I'm dealing with a little bit of re-triggering. I think this is probably because that pad is a little bit light, and my tom mount is especially springy, and so I think the pad is actually bouncing up just a little bit on the head and then triggering. On top of that, I've really got to whack at it to get that maximum 127 volume to register. So I'm going to mess with the sensitivity again, just take it up a couple of spots, and then you'll watch me here in just a second go to the advanced settings and just change that re-trigger cancel. Now, this is a little tip when you're trying to dial in drums. Sometimes it's hard to see those solid white T lines. If you hit a rim, it will kind of reset. You can see then that you'll have an outlined line for a rim setting, and that can be helpful just to help you see if there's any re-triggers happening. So that dialed this drum in, and actually the other ones went just the same way. Now the website says that these pads have no hot spotting, but I think we all know that pretty much everything does. So as expected, the hot spot on these is right in the center of the drum. It's also interestingly a little bit hotter than the rest of the drum as you go, straight up toward 12 o'clock. I don't think this is a bad thing. Obviously, if you have a hot spot in the drum, you want it to be the center. And frankly, these hot spots are not as drastic as a lot of the mesh head single pickup in the middle of the drum units that you'll find out there. So this is all testing on the snare drum. I went around the rest of the kit and tested them all. and it's identical. They all hotspot in the center, but it's not as much as you would expect probably. And so I'm really fine with the hotspotting and actually a little bit impressed. Now take a look at this little light on a TD50 module. It lights up whenever a rim is triggered. As I move around this drum pad, you'll see that it's not lighting up all the way around. It's lighting up at the bottom for sure, but on this pad, it's only lighting up about 3/4 of the way. On the other pads, it's only lighting up at the bottom. Now, I didn't notice this when I was playing it on the kit because every time I went to hit the rim, I was hitting the bottom of the drum pad. But this is troublesome that it's not a 360-degree edge trigger. I'm not sure why it's like that on every pad. It seems a little bit lazy, and it's a little bit worrisome that the triggers don't trigger all the way around these pads. So now we need to talk about some of the shortfalls of this product. They're obviously not perfect, nothing ever is. And so in the time that I've spent with them, here are some things that I've found that are less than desirable. Now, the first issues are pragmatic, and they're not a fault of the product. They're just things that you need to understand if you're thinking about getting the product. The first issues are logistic, and they're unavoidable, but they have to do with the bass drum. Now, this is becoming your bass drum. Your pedal's going to clamp here, and it's going to sit up against your bass drum here. That means that there is space where you're going to need to move your bass drum away from you so that there's room for this to sit. If you have toms mounted to your bass drum, they're going to need to move this far too. That means that you're going to have to come up with some solution of trying to bring your toms forward by however much this is in order to have the exact same playing experience that you're used to. Now, if your toms are mounted to cymbal stands or on a rack like I've got, you can just pull your bass drum away, set this guy down. When you're done, pull it up, pull your bass drum back. But if your toms are mounted into your bass drum, you're going to have to figure out a way to deal with that. Now, I've been thinking about trying to come up with a solution on how you can have a muted bass drum that is temporary and quick. And I believe that those companies that we talked about that failed a while back, Infused, they had a kick tower that would still sit in front of your bass drum, meaning you have this same issue of distance. And I think that the Aquarian on heads used a thin trigger pad that clipped to the bass drum in a couple of spots, but they market it as a hybrid solution as opposed to a silent solution, meaning that you're still hitting the bass drum, albeit through a small dampening pad. And so you weren't actually getting a silent bass drum. This seems like the best solution, shy of maybe using like a Roland KT10, which is a self-contained bass drum that frankly still takes up space. So they've done a good solution here, but it's not perfect. If you've got mounted toms mounted into your bass drum, you're going to have to find another solution. The other issue, again, is with this bass drum, and it has to do with, as I talked about before, just the feel and the playability of this solution. It's something you have to get used to. The weight of the beater is shifted. It's different. This beater is a little bit thick, and I kind of don't love the shape. I wish that there was a way, I have this pulled all the way up, which gives me as much distance from between the beater and the pad as I can. I wish that there was more. I wish this was bent in a way that would give me more throw and rebound than this. I could probably mess around with bending the shaft to get it someplace that I like it more. It's a small change, it might be personal preference, but I just wish that there were more space. And I don't love this solution for a bass drum, but I don't have a better idea. I think this is the best solution. Another limitation that we've run into is depending on the angle of your toms. Now, I've got my toms angled, I think, not unreasonably. I know some folks like to keep things low and flat. If so, you'll have no issues whatsoever. That said, at my angle, if I work to beat the crap out of these pads, I can get them, these two anyway, I can get them to jump over the rim. It's not easy to do. By playing up on the top of the drum as hard as I can, you can get the bottom of the drum to bounce a little bit and clear the lip. An easy solution was to take a little piece of gaff tape, fold it over, and put it on the inside of the rim, and that kept the pad from jumping all the way off. That said, I'm really beating these things up to get them to jump. But if you've got more of an angle on your toms than I do, and I know there are some folks who like them to be, just about 90 degrees to the ground, you're going to have a problem getting these pads to stay on your drums and not jump the rim. Now, the last barrier I have is kind of a big one, but it also kind of has nothing to do with this product. This product, these smart pads are made to replace your drums with electronic triggers that also mute the drums. And I think they're very successful in that. Now, the problem comes for, their what we think is probably number one intended use being to let someone who plays an acoustic kit, who only has enough space for an acoustic kit, convert to electronic kits for silent practice for their neighbors and friends, but that they can hear a full kit. And the problem is that this is a full drum setup, but it's not a full kit. So if you want to be able to set up your acoustic drums for silent practice, but electronic practice, you're going to need a module and you're going to need cymbals. And so this endeavor becomes significantly more expensive when you need to add cymbal pads and you need to add a module. Now, that said, you can grab a module online at a reasonable price if you want to grab something used off of Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, something like that. A number of these samples that I've played for you today, the timpani and some of the melodic things done toward the beginning of this video, were all done with a Roland TD8 module that I picked up used for less than $200 off Facebook Marketplace. Additionally, places like Music Go Round or again, online marketplace, things like that, you can find a full cymbal setup used very affordably. Some of the Roland CY cymbals, some of the 5 and 8 inches now, are going for $20 and $30. And if you step back and want to get a PD8 or something like that, it can be even cheaper. So it's not an insurmountable barrier. It's just adding more cost to getting that full setup. Now, speaking of cost, let's talk about it. These pads are available a la carte for a little over $100 to $150, depending on the size of the pad. If you want a full 5-piece drum setup, that's 4 pads for snare and toms plus the bass pad. After shipping, it's going to run you a little over $600. If I'm being honest, I don't think that they're overcharging for these products. I just think that that's expensive. When you're looking at wanting to quickly convert your entire kit, you got $600 in those pads, you've got another 200 at least in a module, and then you're sitting at, I don't know, we'll say you can get some deals for another $100 and get your cymbals taken care of. You're coming up on $1,000. And at that point, you might be able to just buy a used Roland TD-17 on a great deal. Now, that said, if you're limited by space, then this is still the better option. And if you want any of those other uses, maybe buying a pad or two, or even buying the whole thing, is a completely different story. So we've talked about what I dislike about these products. What do I like? I like that they do exactly what they're supposed to do. I like that they are pretty much idiot-proof. There is one thing to plug in and you set them on a drum. There is no cord or cable. There is no battery. These are just simple and they're durable. I have to baby a trigger. You put it in the styrofoam, you put it in the box, you put it in another box, and gently carry them to gigs. These guys, I would feel pretty comfortable with throwing one in my stick bag, in my stick backpack, and taking it with me to a gig. I love the thought of being able to replace as opposed to supplement the sound of a drum. I'm not playing huge venues. That means that if I'm triggering a drum, the audience is still going to hear my drum. I can use one of these on a snare drum, turn the snares off, and it becomes almost silent. In that case, I can put whatever snare sound I want on there, and I can have a different snare when needed for the right song. I can replace a floor tom if I'm not going to need it for the song with sleigh bells, with claps, with tambourines, with whatever I need. And the sound of the floor tom is not going to be heard by the audience, only what I want them to hear. And it means I don't have to bring an extra stand and an arm and try and adjust and get a BT1 or a small electronic pad on a stand exactly where I want it when I'm only using it for one or two songs. This can sit under my floor tom. It can pull out and sit on top. I can plug it in and be ready to go. And so would I buy these products if they weren't being sent to me for review? I don't know that I would buy the whole kit because I have a house and an understanding family and enough space for an electronic kit and for an acoustic kit and for all the garbage that I've acquired over the years. That said, am I probably going to use two of these pads at my next gig to just throw on drums and completely replace the sounds using a small module? I think I'm going to try, and I think I'm going to like it. I think the audience is going to like it too. I can definitely see a value in having a couple of these pads that I can use to replace my current drum sounds while still playing an acoustic kit. Now, again, if you are in a situation where you are space-bound and you need a compact, portable, temporary, quick solution, I think these are pretty great. I don't think that there's a better solution to be able to get electronic sounds that are going to eliminate the noise for your neighbors. So my overall review, do these do what they're supposed to do? When I put these videos together, I usually try and wait until the very end before I take anything apart for fear that I might not be able to put it back together. The fact that these drums weren't triggering 360 degrees around the rim was bothering me, but for some reason I didn't put together why until this morning. It dawned on me that maybe these weren't drum pads, but were actually cymbal pads disguised as drums. And it turns out that I was right. These have a single trigger in the middle of the rubberized drum pad, and then they have an edge switch running around them. Now on the snare drum, this runs almost 360 degrees around because it's got two 180-degree sensors coming out of a single port and then going around together and meeting almost together. That leaves two spots where the triggers don't really sound an edge. The gray pads, the toms, only have a 180-degree edge sensor. And so what this means is that you actually have chokeable drum pads. Now, this does open up some new possibilities, but also can create some problems if you were planning on splitting, say, the 4 drum pads and running them into something like a TM2. And we've covered the issues with splitting cymbals in my splitting cables video. So check that out if you're wondering what some of those issues might be. So with the knowledge that these are actually technically cymbals with a switch sensor around the edge and a piezo trigger in the middle, and knowing that Unlock brand from World Drummers does have 360-degree triggering, I'm really wondering why they didn't put these on all of the drums and only put it on the snare drum. I'm pretty sure that they can make a single edge trigger that goes all the way around the drum, leaving just a small single area where it won't actually trigger. If the folks at World Drummers are listening, I would suggest installing a 360-degree edge sensor on all of the drum pads, not just the snare pad. And additionally, probably lining the one spot that's not going to trigger at the very top of the drum, right by the W logo. That way, drummers know exactly where it's not going to trigger and can easily avoid that spot when they're trying to get a rim sound. The 3 issues that are affecting a perfect review at this point are the fact that the toms can jump the rim if you play way too hard on them. And I think possibly adding a little bit of more weight to the drum pads could keep that from happening. The bass drum issue, which is something that I don't love, but as I said before, there's no better way to do it, in my opinion. And so this is an inevitability that I just don't like and probably shouldn't actually affect my review. The third is this fact that the triggering doesn't go all the way around the rims. And I think, without knowing what the actual production and installation costs of those edge sensors is, I think this should be a pretty easy fix. I really hope the folks at World Drummers go ahead and decide to make a 360-degree rim trigger. And if they do decide to do that and let me know, I will post it in the comments here so that you'll know that what I have right now is a 4 out of 5 review. But if that rim goes all the way around and triggers, I would probably up that review by at least a half. These drums do what they do pretty well. They do allow you to very quickly convert your acoustic drums to electronic, provided you've got a module. They require no modifications. The pads themselves trigger very well. The rims leave just a little bit to be desired, but again, I think it's an easy, quick fix. And so overall, if you're in any of the situations that I've described, I think these are a fun and interesting product that have a lot of versatility and a lot of options. Is there anything I missed in this review? Is there anything you'd like to see still? Please drop me a comment and let me know, and I'm happy to take a look at things. This is also my last chance to remind you to like and subscribe, knowing that if I get to 1,000 subscribers on this channel, I'm going to get a hold of Lemon's top of the line drum kit and give that a very thorough review. Thanks for watching.